January 1933. Adolf Hitler has taken power in Germany. He has got there by promising to be a man of peace. He has barely even mentioned the Jews. But now he can pursue his real agenda and rid Germany of his long-standing enemies.
The Jew was the enemy within, and the great Hitler, the great leader, was now pointing that out.
But not all Germans are behind him.
Many were upset by the ill treatment of Jews.
So he must find a way of capturing their minds to turn them to his way of thinking. This is the story of how Hitler and the Nazis bend an entire people to his will and groom them into participating in the most evil regime in history. A month after coming to power, a nervous Adolf Hitler takes to the airwaves. It is his first ever radio address to the German people. Germany is in the grip of the Great Depression. Faltering at first, he describes just how serious the situation is.
The misery of our people is horrible to behold. Millions are unemployed and starving.
Hitler explains that the task ahead is massive.
Germany is suffering from the most severe crisis in the standard of living it has experienced in the entire history of the country. There are hundreds of thousands of people homeless.
Some third of the workforce is unemployed, and the knock-on effects of that in terms of poor food, family conditions, work conditions, all suffer.
There is clearly a need to come up with some kind of big bang solution to unemployment.
Hitler had won power by promising to make the economy his priority.
The Nazi slogan was Brot und Arbeit, bread and work, basic things that the Germans had grown accustomed not to having, they promised to restore.
The task with which we are faced is the hardest which has fallen to German statesmen within the memory of man.
He signs off by asking the people to give him 4 years to achieve his goals.
He said, look, we will do what we've promised, but we need time to do so. So please give us Geduld, be patient.
But what many German people don't realize is that economics is not what really concerns Hitler. He has long-standing ambitions, which he fails to mention in his speech. Ideological obsessions dating back to his experiences in World War I and the 1920s, expressed through his writings in Mein Kampf. First and foremost, he wants to rid Germany of the Jews.
He built the party on rabid anti-Semitism.
He sees them as a global, malevolent force with no sense of nationhood, who are to blame for Germany's crisis.
This great Jewish plot to take over the world, and we Germans are suffering from that. It's an international movement, but we in Germany, because of our grim conditions post-war, we are the victims. So our way forward is to get rid of the Jew.
Within weeks of taking power, rather than tackle unemployment, Hitler targets the Jews. A nationwide boycott of Jewish-owned shops and businesses sees brown shirts man the blockade. But it doesn't go well. The reaction of the majority of Germans is not as expected. They keep going to Jewish-owned shops. The German people simply aren't interested in Hitler's brand of anti-Semitism. A report from an American diplomat in Leipzig summarizes the effect of the boycott, describing it as
unpopular with the working classes and the educated circles of the middle classes.
The blockade is called off after just one day. The clear lesson for Hitler is that if he is to win over the Germans to his way of thinking, then he must first gain their confidence and do something about the economy. As a result, he won't mention the Jews again for 4 more years.
This isn't because he's gone soft on the Jewish question, but because he knows that politically there's more to be gained by a softer approach than by a harder line. He remains resolutely anti-Semitic, but publicly he's careful not to make that a major plank in his programme. It's for public consumption, essentially, the apparently softer line.
Along with his propaganda mastermind, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler devises a new plan to win the hearts and minds of his population. They unveil a nationwide battle for work, financed by a 1 billion Reichsmark economic revival program.
He draws up plans for road building, for construction works, for training young men who are unemployed, training them in ways which are socially desirable.
A massive, high-profile construction drive begins. Goebbels makes sure the propaganda cameras capture the Führer leading from the front.
Hitler himself makes a great show of appearing on building sites, moving earth.
The centerpiece are the autobahns which form the backbone of their propaganda campaign. The idea is to link Germany with 6,000 new kilometers of gleaming roadway.
The Autobahn is the symbol of growth. It's a symbol of bigger thinking. It's a symbol of outwardness. We're going somewhere, and we're doing it physically through our road system.
The promise is that ordinary Germans can travel freely and explore their nation.
Germans got very excited, as you might say they still are today, about the idea of driving on motorways, of exploring their own fatherland.
It looked like a vision of the future. It felt like a brave new world.
Critically, these projects require large numbers of workers.
A lot of these constructions involved unimaginable numbers of manual labor, so they were really large-scale work creation schemes.
So let's ask the young men who were unemployed and listless and rootless, let them be the pioneers who build the motorways, build the Autobahn. So they will be contributing something very positive and valuable to the growth of Germany, as well as earning good money for themselves.
Next, Hitler reforms the inefficient German labor market with another policy. His answer is the new German Labour Front, the Deutsches Arbeitsfront.
On the surface, the Labour Front is the new form of trade unionism. They would work together, wage rates, income, profits would be discussed communally, and compromises reached that would benefit everybody.
Ostensibly, it looks like labour reform, but it is actually a smokescreen that allows Hitler to take on a new target: the trade unions. Prior to coming to power, he has always seen them as communists, an enemy almost as hated as the Jews. He also thinks they are a threat to the status quo of the nation, placing too much power in the hands of the workers. So he shuts the trades unions down. Their leaders are arrested, and their funds stolen. All other unions are outlawed. Employment or trade becomes impossible without a membership card.
It was the control of the workforce from above. It was the Nazi determination not to allow workers to be a disruptive element in German society.
A year in, Hitler's regime is going to plan. He is seen as a man of action, selflessly dedicated to getting the nation working again. He is offering a modern, exciting vision of the future, and is successfully steering Germany out of a crisis. Unemployment is in sharp decline, down to 4 million from 6 million. But the economic program is just the first phase. The next step is to take the message of Nazism into every aspect of people's lives. Hitler realizes that if he is to push through his own agenda, he must first capture their hearts and minds. Hitler's belief in accomplishing this is unwavering.
Hitler had such a strength of will. He said to one friend, "You will see, we will do the impossible, we will work wonders, we will accomplish miracles."
His faith in what his Nazi party can achieve is equally unshakable.
Only the Nazi Party has sufficient drive, purpose, understanding, and belief in itself to make this a reality.
So he sets about a bold new keynote policy. Its name is the Volksgemeinschaft, the People's Community. A social engineering project of epic proportions. Its goal is simple: to tie everybody into believing in Nazism and accepting its values.
Volksgemeinschaft is the notion of a special people in a special nation. Very powerful notion that Germany was special, and the Volk defined that special quality. The Volk, therefore, was the term used to describe the German people at their best.
Hitler's line is that only when the German people come together and move forward as one would the community achieve great things and find its way out of the crisis.
The national community finding its divinely ordained destiny was one of Hitler's favorite phrases. It's there in all of his speeches. It's repeated endlessly by other key orators such as Goebbels. That emotional sense of coming together, of sharing a communal spirit, of being united by the exciting zeitgeist of a new era, but also sharing the sacrifices, standing together in solidarity in hard times is part of this community spirit that the Nazis are so effective at mobilizing and celebrating.
At the head of the community is the Führer, tirelessly dedicating himself to the needs of the German people. The Volksgemeinschaft is designed to be modern, exciting, and fun. A celebration of Germany's greatness. New national days like the Day of Solidarity and the Führer's birthday create the sense of an uplifting national community. They bring people together in celebration. Critical to the Volksgemeinschaft idea is that it takes the message of Nazism into all areas of German life, even to the dinner tables of Germany.
For example, there was the one-pot stew Sunday. The idea was that people would not eat meat on Sundays. Traditionally, on Sunday, you would have a roast. But instead, they would donate the money that was saved to a public scheme, a welfare scheme to help the poor. And then there would be get-togethers where people would eat together a one-pot stew without meat.
The Sunday meal is no longer a family affair, but a part of a wider communal effort for the German cause.
The idea that families weren't simply units individually, they were part of a greater community. And that individuals took their worth, not from their individuality, but from their collective membership, or their membership of the collective.
To help foster the Volksgemeinschaft, the Nazi Party permeates all levels of society.
National Socialism infiltrates all kinds of areas of daily life, whether it's in voluntary organizations or in professional life. People came into contact with representatives of National Socialism.
Nazism now becomes present at every stage of a German's life. Youngsters in particular are targeted to make them subscribe to the vision.
What Nazism tried to do was try to become the political wing of the German people as a whole. And if you're going to do that, you're not necessarily going to convince the older generation. But what you can do is start absorbing the younger generation into your movement. So if everything you do is through or for the party, then you will become a good little Nazi. So what's the best way of doing that is don't have a Boy Scout movement, have a Hitler Youth movement.
Abolishing, while he did it, similar rival youth organisations like the Boy Scouts and various Catholic and Protestant religious clubs and groups. They all were put together into a Hitler Youth for boys and young men and a Bund Deutsche Mädchen, a League of German Girls for young women.
Central to the sense of communal identity are uniforms.
Uniforms are a fantastic vehicle for bringing people together as a group, for giving them that sense of belonging to a special community.
These new Nazi organizations are fun. For the first time, youngsters can explore their fatherland and taste adventure. Weddings were Nazified too. Newlyweds receive a copy of Mein Kampf on their marriage day. The party's reach even extends to the workplace. A massive workers' movement, Strength Through Joy, is launched to offer benefits to workers, like trips and holidays.
Strength Through Joy was one of the most successful Nazi organizations in propagandistic terms, providing leisure programs for workers, helping them to relax, to enjoy life, and simultaneously to indoctrinate them into the spirit of fascism.
They're allowed to go on holidays at 50% below the market rate. Cruise liners are created as well. Also, state-of-the-art canteens are built in every factory. Even little orchestras go on tours around these factories as well.
The propaganda message is clear. The Nazi Party will look after you and offer you a world of promise. The Germans buy into this dream of exciting new opportunities. But what they may not realize is that all this is part of Hitler's secret agenda. Because there is a flip side to the Volksgemeinschaft. Hitler's vision differentiates clearly between those who are inside the community, and therefore of pure German blood, and those who are outside it, like the Jews.
It was also powerful because it had a very clear barrier between those who belonged to the national community and those who didn't. So it made you feel valued, and it had easy scapegoats that you could blame problems on when they were not part of the national community.
That is why the Jews could not be part of the Volk. It was exclusive, because it was Aryan, it was principled, and it related to the glorious past and offered the glorious future.
The Volksgemeinschaft is the first stage in a slow process of capturing Germans' minds and making them view the Jews as an underclass. In time, Hitler and his inner circle will use this to make the Germans complicit in appalling crimes. But for now, they must remain patient. After a year in office, things are looking good for Adolf Hitler. He is turning around the economy, creating an exciting new social model for Germany, and opening up the country via the autobahns. Above all, he is getting Germans working again.
and unemployment falls by 33%. So this is something that he can trumpet towards his supporters and say, look, I fulfilled one aspect of my programme, unemployment is going down.
The official line is that unemployment is down due to flagship schemes like the Autobahns. In fact, another force is at work. Many of the new jobs are down to something else. Hitler is secretly preparing for war. Starting in 1933, the Nazi regime spends huge amounts of cash on weapons. 35 billion Reichsmarks. It dwarfs all other forms of public spending, including all the work creation schemes. It fits into another part of Hitler's real agenda. In his mind, war with Russia is not only unavoidable, it is necessary. Ever since the days of Mein Kampf, it is Hitler's profound conviction that communism is a threat to the world. He regards it as part of an international Jewish plot, and he thinks an armed showdown with Russia is inevitable.
Hitler's ambition, or his expectation, if not ambition, is that at some point there'll be a war. The Soviet Union will have to be faced down militarily at some point. Our first duty is to rearm, to make the nation strong through military means.
Rearmament will also allow him to realize another of his aspirations conceived years earlier. The idea of Lebensraum, or living space, which he believes is essential for the German nation to grow.
Lebensraum is the idea of living space, that Germany really has too high a density of population. There are too many people occupying too small a space, and therefore that's restricting Germany's economic development, especially in industry, but mostly in agriculture.
For Hitler, territorial space will solve the nation's economic problems and help feed his people. And he believes the land he needs can be seized from those he views as inferior.
From Poland on, Europe was Slav, and the East is Slav, therefore we have the entitlement to take it over. So Lebensraum, living space, which we Germans need, will be found most prominently in the East. As a superior people, they could take land occupied by inferior people.
The problem that Hitler faces is that any talk of going to war to win land is appalling to most Germans. He has been elected as a man of peace who promised not to go to war. Memories of the horrors of World War I are still fresh in people's minds. 2.4 million of their countrymen were killed. Hundreds of thousands were wounded. So this presents Hitler with a problem: how to sell rearmament to the Germans. He comes up with a justification. It's not about preparing for war, it's about the restoration of German pride.
So this is a great program. It's not suffering, fellow Germans. It is an advance towards our providential destiny, the greatness, the restoration of the greatness of Germany.
Rearmament, Hitler says, is an antidote to the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. Signed by the Allies in 1919, the Versailles Treaty is when the Allies made Germany pay for World War I. It also restricts the size of the German armed forces.
Germany was required under Versailles settlement to limit its armaments production and to limit its army to 100,000 only. But he calculated, correctly as it turned out, that if he pushed hard enough, there wouldn't be a response.
In March 1935, Hitler introduces conscription. It is in total defiance of the Versailles Treaty. The army swells from the permitted 100,000 to 500,000 men.
He's allowed to get away with it, and that gives him more and more confidence. So rearmament is a great way of Hitler pushing the boundaries forward.
Publicly, he continues to reassure the people that he doesn't want war. He is rearming for the preservation of peace. In a speech on the 16th of March 1935, he makes this promise crystal clear.
The government renews its resolve before the German folk and before the entire world that it will never stop beyond the bounds of preserving German honor and the freedom of the Reich, and in particular shall never make of the German national arms an instrument of warlike aggression, but an instrument confined exclusively to defense and thereby to the preservation of peace.
However, rearmament does have unexpected results. It costs a fortune and diverts resources from the German population towards the military. Wages are low, and Germans are made to work longer and harder than ever before. All this takes the shine off the carefully constructed dream of a national community that fulfills everyone's aspirations.
Hardship, in a sense, can be enriching or ennobling, is the Nazi line. Don't see hardship as the enemy. But of course, beyond a certain point, if you're asking people to go without, there has to be some reward for it eventually.
Hitler charges propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels with keeping in touch with popular opinion. He does this by sending out secret agents to eavesdrop on conversations and to prepare reports. It's the only effective polling data available in a totalitarian state. What he learns is alarming.
The privations they were undergoing were beginning to bite.
These are unpopular, they cause a lot of muttering in queues, in shops, and gives rise to considerable anxiety on the part of the Nazi regime.
Despite this huge effort to win hearts and minds, it is clear that popular support is fragile. Goebbels and Hitler must find another way to bring the people behind the Nazis. So they come up with a plan to harness dissent and unite Germans against a common enemy. They will blame the economic hardship on the Jews.
The scapegoat notion, the identifiable enemy within, does distract from the internal economic problems, the unemployment problems, which still persist. And if they are to blame for the crisis in the first place, this is simply justice. This is not retribution, this is justice. The Jews have been given what they genuinely deserve.
Nuremberg, 1935. The annual Nazi Party rally. A massive propaganda spectacle held every year.
Nuremberg is important. It was the site from the 20s onwards of the annual Nazi Party rallies.
But as the pageant unfolds, behind the scenes, there's a last-minute rewrite of the rally's keynote speech.
Hitler is desperate to show the party that he's got something big to deliver. And originally it's going to be on foreign policy, but that gets pulled. And a new policy is drawn up.
Instead, this new policy is a raft of anti-Semitic laws.
If the Nuremberg laws are drawn up as the first major attempt to turn Germany into a racial state, which was Hitler's ambition. And it obviously attacked the Jew within.
The law for the protection of German blood and honor outlaws marriage between Germans and Jews.
Germans were forbidden from marrying Jews, from having any sexual relations with Jews. If Germans were already married to Jews, they were encouraged and allowed to divorce Jews without any problem at all. So they were Nazi racial theories made horrendous flesh.
The Reich citizenship law strips Jews of their citizenship and makes them mere subjects, unlike the rest of the population. They become legal outsiders. However, this leads to unexpected complications.
The Germans couldn't really define who was a Jew and who wasn't a Jew, even though they'd spent years and years and years discussing this question.
So new legislation is drawn up to sort out the confusion and define who exactly is a German and who is a Jew in the eyes of the law.
It laid down that anybody with 3 grandparents who were Jewish was by definition a Jew, and therefore not entitled to full citizenship, not entitled to employment rights, not entitled to legal rights, not entitled to education.
To be a full Jew has grave consequences, but even Germans with only 1 or 2 Jewish grandparents, known as Mischlinge or mongrels, also fall foul of the law.
It's the first clear defining mark of the impossibility of being Jewish and being German.
Faced with this sudden loss of rights, some Mischlinge defend themselves, while other Germans show their support.
Various organizations came into being after the Nuremberg race laws were brought in, largely to defend those Jews who were only just Jews, if one could put it that way, the Mischlinge.
An association of non-Aryan Christians is formed. At one point, it has 80,000 members.
So there's an attempt made to provide protection for Jews. It's the first attempt, really, in Nazi Germany for a non-Jewish organization to present itself as in some way protective.
At this stage, the Nazis tolerate this opposition. Eventually, they will phase it out, because Hitler's laws are accepted by the majority of Germans. They are starting to believe that the Jews are to blame, and the purity of the German folk comes before the rights of the Jews. Seven months after the Nuremberg race laws, Hitler is making progress, but he still hasn't completely captured the hearts and minds of the German population. Behind the scenes, Hitler plots a new propaganda coup to distract from the economic hardships at home. He plans to appeal once again to German national pride. Hitler decides to send troops back into the Rhineland, an area of eastern Germany that was demilitarized after World War I.
The Rhineland had been a burning issue for Germans since 1918. It was German land which the French occupied, and then, having occupied it, declared that it had to be demilitarized.
At first, his generals don't agree.
Some of his generals warned him, it's too dangerous, mein Führer. The French will react, and the British might join them in the reaction. He grew very angry at this, and he said, I expect National Socialist troops to be on the offensive, not the defensive.
He overrules them and takes a massive gamble. In March 1936, he sends German troops into the Rhineland, breaching the terms of the Versailles Treaty once again.
And it worked. The Rhine is occupied, happens in a couple of days. The French protest, but they make no move to resist. The risk comes off. It's a great coup.
It makes him a hero in the eyes of his people. Then Hitler finally reveals his true agenda, the preparation for war. He states,
The German economy must be fit for war in 4 years.
It begins with a very public program of grand schemes, including permanent defensive fortifications and showpiece military buildings. A program of domestic manufacture of essential war materials also begins. These include rubber, oil, and textiles. The idea is that Germany will no longer need to import these vital supplies.
Germany still relies on vast amounts of imports. The best example of that is oil. Germany imported 65% of all its oil. So really, he wanted to find ways of creating synthetic oil, of creating synthetic rubber, so that he could actually finance his rearmament without the need of purchasing vast quantities of overseas oil.
Hitler's most prominent deputy, Hermann Göring, is brought in to run what becomes known as the 4-year plan.
Göring is brought in to produce this so-called 4-year plan, one of the few programs Hitler actually initiated himself.
As part of the plan, the Nazis not only champion synthetic raw materials for war, but also for the German people. They create low-grade consumer products and foodstuffs for Germans. But inside German homes, the crude substitutes for imported goods lead to yet more reports of moaning and discontent. However, on the surface, the propaganda image is one of accessible consumer goods. Not least the motor car. And Hitler gives his people a shiny new goal to aspire to. He champions the Volkswagen, or people's car.
The Strength Through Joy car produced by a Nazi organization. The prospectuses for it were everywhere, and people had these lovely little savings tins that were very brightly colored with pictures of happy families driving around a pretty picturesque German countryside in these new cars.
Very inspiring, very uplifting. The notion that you could have a motor car and you could choose to go out under your own steam, your own choice. We take that so for granted, but for Germans in the 30s, what an ambition to have your own car.
Hitler even sketches the concept for the Volkswagen himself and commissions automotive designer Ferdinand Porsche to make it a reality. Hitler has now been in power for 3 years. Germany looks like a country that is going places. It's showcasing itself on the international stage. It's emboldened and rearmed. The Nazis are offering people new consumer goods and an attractive new lifestyle. But behind the scenes, the country is on the verge of an economic crisis. Recovery and rearmament have required huge quantities of imports. The nation has always been short of foreign currency to pay for these imported goods.
The problem of paying for imports with scarce foreign exchange never leaves the Third Reich. It's a recurring nightmare.
At one stage, the foreign currency reserves are down to crisis levels, with just enough for a week's worth of imports. The reality of the economic situation starts to hit people hard. Food becomes expensive, and there are shortages of clothing and household goods. Few can ever hope to afford the much-vaunted people's car or the other sweeteners trumpeted by the Nazi propaganda machine.
There was a real fear by 1937 that German workers were becoming disgruntled through the relative decline in their wages. They weren't getting what they'd been expected to receive, and they weren't getting what they'd been promised.
However, one thing saves Hitler and his party. World events come to their aid. In 1937, international trade starts to pick up. The global economy recovers over the next 12 months.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. The economy in Europe picks up, and Germany, along with other countries, begins to feel the benefits in employment terms of the pickup. That's the luck that Hitler and the Nazis have.
For Hitler's inner circle, it's a huge relief. They have turned the corner. From the brink of collapse, it begins to look like the plan is working. Germany's coffers start to refill. The Third Reich can once again afford to feed its population. Crucially, unemployment goes down to virtually nothing. It allows Hitler to seem like an economic genius.
Economic recovery is tied to political strength, or the notion of the leader. It's the Führer who's done it. Without the Führer, there wouldn't be this recovery. He's now this elevated leader, this figurehead that one can take pride in. The man who's led Germany out of the crises.
With his credibility restored, Hitler now believes he can ratchet up racial policy to a new level of persecution against his old foe, the Jews. In 1937, Hitler mentions the Jews for the first time in 4 years. He tries out the line he will later use to justify the Holocaust: that the Jews are the cause of their own misfortune.
He openly attacked Jewry as the cause of German difficulties, and he implies very strongly the Jews have a recompense facing them, given that they are trying to destroy the attempts of the new German movement, the new Nazi movement, to better Germany, to improve Germany, to elevate Germany. But Jewry is plotting to destroy that. The Jew was the enemy within, and the great Hitler, the great leader, was now pointing that out.
In 1938, 2 key organs of the state become involved in racial legislation. Now the secret police and Gestapo are unleashed on the Jews.
Jews are abused verbally. They let it be known that they're anti-Jewish, that they're out to get the Jews. So there's that intimidation in the air. They let it be known they are marked people. That's the Gestapo technique for frightening. So the SD essentially do the intelligence work. The Gestapo do the putting on the frighteners.
In the face of such pressure, over 250,000 German Jews leave the country. Often, their possessions and wealth is seized and used to fund the Nazi Party's own budget. But half of Germany's Jews remain. To apply more pressure, persecution goes a step further. Jewish businesses are Aryanized. The decree for the registration of Jewish property further excludes Jews from economic life. They are banned from owning businesses. They have to sell them to Aryan Germans at knockdown prices. Then, Goebbels plots a new course of action that will take all this a stage further. His idea is to have a national day of outpouring of violence against the Jews. It will become known as Reichskristallnacht. He even has a perfect justification: the shooting of a German diplomat, Ernst vom Rath.
This provided a welcome excuse for the Nazi state to unleash a torrent of anti-Semitic violence on German cities.
It had been pre-planned. All they wanted was a pretext, and the assassination was the pretext.
There is a torrent of violence. The Nazis attack Jewish properties and businesses.
Homes are ransacked, synagogues are smashed. The term Kristallnacht, crystal night, comes from the sound, the image of the breaking glass.
Crowds, urged on by the SS, wrecked German shops and smashed the plate glass in store windows and attacked and brutalized and beat up Jews.
Night of the Broken Glass was the natural culmination of a political party and a regime that preached violent anti-Semitism.
1,000 synagogues are burnt. 7,000 businesses destroyed. 91 Jews killed. 30,000 sent to concentration camps. To cap it all, Goebbels' propaganda peddles the line that the Jews brought it all upon themselves.
Kristallnacht is blamed on the Jews. And it said that people rose up in their anger against the Jews and attacked them. And that's the way Goebbels put it in his propaganda. It was a popular movement of the people. We know, of course, it would work the other way.
By the end of 1938, from a Nazi perspective, their policies are a success. Hitler has won the people's hearts and minds, and he has groomed them to his way of thinking. For the first time, the Germans can see what Hitler's anti-Semitism really means, and they are starting to embrace it.
Perhaps the most interesting and most worrying feature about that one night in November was the willing participation of many ordinary civilian bystanders in the violence.
It was an open demonstration of the bestiality and the hatred that the Nazis held for their Jewish population, and an awful warning of worse to come.
At last, Hitler has the German people where he wants them.
So there's a sense that this is a new dawn, a new age that provides exciting new opportunities for a lot of people who are very happy to go along with the violence that accompanies all of this.
Germany has been rearmed. Hitler's enemies, like the Jews, can be persecuted with minimal resistance. Now, he is ready for war. Adolf Hitler has risen to power pretending to be a man of peace. He tells his people he can make Germany great again, without war. But behind the scenes, he's locked in a fierce battle with his generals. They believe he's hell-bent on a suicidal war of territorial expansion. Some are even plotting to kill him. This is the story of how Hitler lies to his people, outmaneuvers his generals, and leads Germany into a catastrophic war. On a bleak winter's day in late 1937, Adolf Hitler summons Germany's military leaders to a meeting at his headquarters. Present are such senior figures as General Werner von Blumberg, Germany's Minister for War. and General Werner von Fritsch, Commander-in-Chief of the army.
They think this is going to be a routine meeting. But Hitler shocks them at the beginning of the meeting by explaining to them that what he's about to tell them should be considered his last will and testament. Hitler then goes on to explain his plans for military expansion.
Step 1. Unite the German-speaking people, many of them incorporated into countries like Austria and Czechoslovakia in the carve-up of Europe after World War I. Step 2. Move east and seize territory in Poland, Ukraine and Russia so that the German people can have extra living space or Lebensraum. It's a dream he's been nursing for nearly 20 years. Many of Germany's generals agree with him. But then Hitler spells out his timetable. German troops should seize Austria and Czechoslovakia, possibly in less than a year. The countries further east would rapidly follow over the next few years. It's a hugely ambitious program. The assembled generals are alarmed. Europe's frontiers are formally guaranteed by the military might of Britain and France. To his military commanders, Hitler seems to be rushing the country into a suicidal war.
And when they leave the meeting, there is considerable distrust and disquiet. What really worried them was that they didn't believe that the German army, that the German armed forces at that stage in late 1937, early 1938, were ready for war. Indeed, they thought that they were woefully unprepared. And it was decided that one or two of them at least should make their views known to Hitler.
One of those who agrees to talk to Hitler is Werner von Blomberg.
Field Marshal von Blomberg was very much of the old school of the German army.
Blomberg is actually quite a pro-Hitler general. He's always seen as rather sort of sympathetic to the Nazis.
But even he has been shocked by what Hitler has said to him that day and was beginning to tire of Hitler's expansionist plans.
He's joined by Werner von Fritsch, also horrified by what he's heard. But Hitler refuses to listen to them.
Hitler was having none of it, and there's no doubt that at that moment he started to doubt their support and to doubt whether he could carry out his plans with them still in place.
As the two men will soon find out, Hitler has a way of dealing with those who oppose him. In the Berlin offices of the Gestapo, an agent combs through the police files. His target is not communists or dissidents. It's von Blomberg. Very soon, the agent finds what he's looking for. The file on Werner von Blomberg shows the general has a dark secret. He's recently remarried. Hitler had been one of the witnesses.
She was considerably younger than him, and it's clear that at some stage he was smitten, he fell in love, and he decided that he wanted to marry her. She was only 25 years old.
But Blomberg's new wife has a secret and colourful past.
She was not only a former prostitute, but had also posed for some pornographic pictures in her past.
The file reveals that she has been a regular fixture at Berlin's sleazy nightclubs and bars. She's a totally unsuitable wife for a senior military figure. The file is sent to Hitler. Hitler, a notorious prude, is appalled.
There was an anecdote going round Berlin at the time that Hitler was washing almost compulsively because he had shaken this lady's hands. But at the same time, it chimed very neatly with Hitler's desire to get rid of von Blumberg, to do away with some of the opposition to his military plans, which he now had in place.
Blumberg is summoned to a meeting and offered a choice. Resign, or his wife's past will be made public. As Hitler had hoped, he chooses to resign. Days later, Werner von Fritsch is also summoned to a meeting with the Führer. A file has mysteriously surfaced, suggesting Fritsch has had a homosexual liaison.
Homosexuality to the Nazis was something that was absolutely abhorrent. And for Hitler personally, who was tremendously homophobic, it was utterly beyond the pale.
Fritsch, too, is forced to resign. Almost immediately, Hitler abolishes the position of war minister and appoints himself supreme commander of the German army.
Hitler actually emerges in much firmer control of the German military than he had been the previous autumn. The army has basically become much more his creature. It's much more subordinated to his will. Any remaining independence of action that it had has been effectively removed.
Yet Hitler faces an obstacle. The German public has elected him as a man of peace. How can he fulfill his expansionist plans, seize new territory, and still keep his promise to them? In the spring of 1938, Hitler launches Phase 1 of his expansionist plans. German troops pour across the border into Austria. They're greeted by cheering crowds.
The Austrians welcomed Hitler and the Nazis into Austria. Many millions of them were Germans by birth, German by upbringing, and they were only too happy to return back to the Reich.
Within days, Hitler arrives in Vienna to claim Austria for his new Greater Germany.
There are wonderful photographs of him addressing 250,300,000 people in the Heldenplatz, the Square of Heroes in the middle of Vienna.
Annexing Austria, even peacefully, is a blatant breach of all international agreements. Yet Britain and France do nothing. Hitler has judged the situation very skillfully. He's gambled on their reluctance to go to war, and won. In Germany, there's also jubilation. Hitler has taken the first step in creating his Greater Germany without bloodshed. In doing so, he's also kept his promise to his people not to take the country to war. The Nazi propaganda machine pumps up the achievement.
The crowds were euphoric. They saw this as being a bloodless invasion that, almost without a shot being fired, Hitler had reintroduced Austria back into a greater Germany. He was a hero at the time.
Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister and close confidant, speaks for many when he writes,
"The Führer is wonderful, a real genius. He sits over maps for hours and broods. It's stirring when he says he wishes to live to see the greater Germanic Reich again."
Yet behind the scenes, Hitler and some of his closest collaborators are planning another aggressive expansion of Germany's borders. Five months after the annexation of Austria, Hitler masses troops on the border with Czechoslovakia and threatens an invasion. The country has a large German minority. Most of them live in a border area known as the Sudetenland. They are the next target on Hitler's shopping list for incorporation into a new Greater Germany.
He felt that the German people had the right to live together in one large nation state. Hitler simply believed this was an entirely natural and just cause, and he had absolutely no hesitation in making this the centerpiece of his foreign policy.
But unlike the Austrians, the Czechs aren't willing to give up territory to Germany. Furthermore, Czech sovereignty is guaranteed by France and supported by Britain. Hitler needs to somehow maintain the illusion to the German people that he's a man of peace. If there is conflict, it shouldn't be seen to be of his making. The job falls to Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. The Nazi propaganda machine swings into action. Newsreels show the Sudeten Germans as a people yearning to become a part of Greater Germany.
There had been a vigorous propaganda campaign beforehand to suggest that these people were persecuted in the Czech state, that they were not given equal rights, and that their legitimate popular wish to become part of Germany was being denied.
Hitler was very clever at telling the world, and of course telling his own people in particular, how badly oppressed the Germans living within the Sudeten borders were, and that this was really a moral crusade for Germany.
Hitler's Nazi sympathizers in the Sudetenland now secretly stir up trouble.
There was a very effective grouping of Nazis, pro-Nazis, who were able to magnify any incident of oppression suffered by the Germans.
It's a classic Nazi trick. Secretly provoke unrest, then make sure it gets lots of news coverage.
Every newsreel carried an example of the oppression of the German people in the Sudetenland. Our people, our German brothers and sisters, are being oppressed in an appalling way in the Sudetenland. This can't be allowed to continue. We must intervene. And the anger that was built up was very effective propaganda.
It's a clever spin. Hitler can now put the army on a war footing while claiming he's merely protecting a helpless, undefended German population. But despite his popularity, Hitler still feels insecure. That summer, Hitler takes another step to reinforce his position.
He had this fear that although the army was sworn to him by an oath of loyalty, You could never trust everybody on every occasion.
What he needs is an alternative source of military power, and he knows just where to find it. The Waffen-SS is the armed paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party.
The men who joined the Waffen-SS were fanatical Nazis, and they also had to meet the SS criterion. They were tall and blonde-haired and had to show that they're of pure Nordic blood for at least 3 generations. They had to swear allegiance to Adolf Hitler. They had to have their blood group tattooed on their arms. They had to have read Mein Kampf. They really had no compunction about what they did and who they killed, as long as it was followed the Nazi ideology. Ordinary Germans and ordinary German soldiers would be scared of these guys.
That summer, the ranks of the Waffen-SS are rapidly expanded. New recruits pour in.
In 1938, the Waffen-SS set up its own training schools. This gave them access to better equipment and better training. It also welded them together as a unique elite corps, which were fanatically devoted to Nazism and to the extermination of communists and Jews.
They were special, they were separate, and they were answerable only to themselves and to the Führer, with no reference to any other authority over them. That's what gives them that fearful image.
They are, in effect, Hitler's private army. His guarantee that if the army turns against him, he has an alternative source of power. It will turn out to be a wise precaution. There's already a growing revolt inside the military. Late that summer, at a cathedral in the German capital, an extraordinary scene is unfolding. A group of military officers have come to ask the cathedral's canon to release them from their oaths of loyalty to the Führer. Among them is Hans Oster, a colonel in German military intelligence. He'd been an early supporter of the Nazis. But now, like the rest of the group, he believes Hitler is rushing the country into a suicidal war. The cathedral canon, also a dissident, is happy to help. He tells them Hitler is a tyrant and that they have no obligation to follow him.
And that was a difficult step for many of those senior military men to make. This was, after all, their commander-in-chief, so they needed, if you like, absolution from the church to prepare them for what they were planning to do.
The conspirators also have the backing of important names in the German military. They include General Erwin von Witzelbahn, commander of the army in Berlin, and Fritz von Schulenburg, vice president of the Berlin police. Both have been deeply disturbed by Hitler's removal of Blumberg and Fritsch and his willingness to risk war with Britain and France.
Many of those who were plotting in the summer of 1938 were those that you might normally imagine were the Nazis' natural echelon of supporters. There were senior military personnel, also senior police personnel. And many of them had initially been supporters of Hitler and the Nazis, but they feel they're being railroaded into reckless foreign policy adventures.
Oster and his colleagues leave the cathedral determined to do all they can to stop Hitler. Over the next few months, the conspirators lay their plans. The idea is to arrest Hitler and remove him from power. They tour Berlin, studying places where they might seize him. The big, outstanding question: when should they act? Meanwhile, on the Czech border, German troops continue to prepare for war. But France and Britain are still guarantors of Czech sovereignty. Yet, even now, Hitler sticks to his claim that he doesn't want war. In a speech to the German people that September, he proclaims,
"I demand that the oppression of these Germans in Czechoslovakia ceases."
Hitler had a very successful technique where he presented himself as a man of peace. He always said he was a former frontline soldier. Why would he, of all people, want a renewal of war? But he presented himself always as a man under great pressure from his own people and from the minorities he was seeking to rescue.
the clock is ticking. War seems imminent. Will the invasion of Czechoslovakia go ahead? Or can the conspirators inside the army stop Hitler before he drags Germany into a reckless war? Suddenly, there's a dramatic new development. In Britain, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain has been watching Hitler's saber rattling with alarm. He now leaves London for a meeting with Hitler.
Discussion between him and me may have useful consequences.
On the morning that he left for Germany, he was sent off from the airport by cheering crowds.
In Germany, Chamberlain is received by Hitler at the Berghof, his mountain retreat in the German Alps.
Chamberlain and Hitler are very different figures. They're 20 years apart. Chamberlain is 69, Hitler is 49.
Chamberlain must have cut a fairly strange figure amongst all these Germans in their Nazi uniforms, with his wing collar, his tie, his rolled-up umbrella.
Chamberlain very much looks like a statesman of the old school, and of course Hitler's a very different beast indeed.
It was the meeting of two cultures, the old Edwardian school of British diplomacy, represented by Chamberlain, and this new aggressive Nazi German movement.
As if to symbolize the significance of the meeting, a thunderstorm breaks overhead.
That day, there was a storm brewing, appropriately enough, and boy was there going to be a storm brewing that day.
Chamberlain is, as many were when they first met Hitler, he's impressed by the charisma, the personality, the character of the man. And that, of course, carries Hitler a long way forward to getting what he wants.
Hitler, once again, presents himself as a man of peace, simply trying to help his fellow Germans. He demands the Sudetenland be given a vote on whether it should secede from Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain appears to accept the argument and agrees to try and sell it to the French and Czech governments. But he leaves a poor impression on his German hosts.
After Chamberlain had left that evening, There was much hilarity amongst the staff and the other people at the Berghof about Chamberlain. There's no doubt that the Germans felt, having met him once, that this was a man who they could get the better of.
In Berlin, Hans Oster and his fellow conspirators are not taken in by Hitler's presentation of himself as a man of peace. They plan their next moves.
To make sure they weren't followed, they went to some quite extraordinary lengths. They used to go for walks together in the park so they could see that nobody was following them. One group of plotters even used to meet in a Berlin swimming pool so they could make sure that any potential Gestapo tail was left in the changing room.
One important question remains unresolved. What to do with Hitler once he's arrested? Most favor a trial, but not everybody agrees. One of them is Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, a former right-wing thug.
Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz had a colourful background. He'd been through First World War and subsequently fought in every radical right-wing paramilitary organisation of the 1920s.
Heinz supports the Nazi cause, but not Hitler's leadership of it. He tells Oster, by now the leading spirit behind the rebellion,
Hitler alive is stronger than all our divisions. He needs to be killed.
The two men come to a secret understanding. Hitler will be shot in the confusion of the arrest. There is now a very real chance Hitler could be killed. Five days after his first trip to see Hitler, Chamberlain returns to Germany. The second meeting is held in the small spa town of Bad Godesberg on the Rhine. Chamberlain's hotel, the Petersburg, is on one side of the river. Hitler stays in his favorite, the Driessen, on the other.
The Driessen is the hotel where Hitler traditionally went to relax, where he used to go to stay when he wanted a holiday. Herr Driessen, the owner of the hotel, was famous as being an arch-Nazi. And he had an interesting sideline. Whenever Hitler came to stay, he would then auction off all of the materials that had been in Hitler's room afterwards to earn a bit of extra money.
As the meeting gets underway, Chamberlain is optimistic. He tells Hitler he's got the deal he wants. Britain has persuaded the French and Czech governments to accept the German demand that the Sudetenland be given a vote on whether to become part of Germany. War can be avoided.
And then, having done so, he sort of leant back in his chair as if to say, haven't I done well? And to his horror, and to the horror of the other people in the room, Hitler thumped the table and he said, no, I'm afraid the rules have changed. I'm afraid that is no longer enough.
He would sort of display these incredible histrionics and theatrics, and his mouth would foam with rage.
Hitler tells an astonished Chamberlain he's no longer interested in a vote.
And it's at this point where he's famously called a carpet biter, because he's like a sort of a rabid dog.
Hitler now tells Chamberlain the situation in the Sudetenland has deteriorated. Hundreds of fellow Germans are being killed almost daily. Forget the vote. He will invade unless the Czechs hand over the Sudetenland to Germany immediately.
And at that point, Chamberlain, literally, his mouth just drops open. And he sits up, and he's absolutely shocked by what Hitler said. Because it means that they haven't just gone back to square one, they've gone back to the square before that.
At that stage, things look very bad indeed.
Hitler now ramps up the pressure on Chamberlain. A carefully orchestrated stream of messengers come and go.
A courier comes in and presents, with a great flourish, a piece of paper to Hitler. It tells Hitler and Chamberlain that 300 Germans have been massacred in a battle in the German Sudetenland. In fact, of course, it hadn't happened at all. It was a complete myth. But it was Hitler's way of really turning the screw onto Chamberlain.
And he'd bang the table in front of Chamberlain and say, "The urgency is evident, Mr. Prime Minister." And Chamberlain really didn't know how to respond. I mean, he had to believe the stories. He couldn't say, "Well, I think it's propaganda." He was duped, if you wish, by a much smarter operator.
The meeting finishes late. Chamberlain returns home deeply disturbed. He's facing a monumental choice. He has to persuade the world that Hitler has a legitimate right to walk into the Sudetenland, or take Britain to war. He soon makes his opinions clear. He tells the House of Commons, in a now infamous phrase, Hitler's threatened invasion of the Sudetenland is merely a quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. In Berlin, the conspirators in the army are certain Hitler is still leading the country to war. They can't believe the British will give in to Hitler's latest demand. Desperate to stop him, they finalize their plans. The invasion may be only days away. At an army garrison in Berlin, Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz assembles a small team. The plan is to arrest Hitler as soon as he's ordered the invasion of the Sudetenland. Arms, ammunition, and hand grenades are handed out. The conspirators check their weapons. But then something happens they hadn't anticipated. Europe's great powers, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, gather in Munich for a final attempt to thrash out a solution to the Sudeten crisis. The meeting is held at the Führerbad, the enormous Nazi headquarters in Munich.
The atmosphere at Munich was tense throughout.
Everybody present is convinced time is running out to prevent the second catastrophic war in Europe in 20 years. But Hitler stands firm. Even now, he maintains his public image that he doesn't want war, but that he's being pushed into it by the Czechs. Across Germany, there's a mood of alarm that despite their faith in him, Hitler is going to break his promise.
The reality was, and we know this from diary entries, that there were serious doubts, not simply among the military, but also among ordinary Germans. It wasn't openly expressed because really there wasn't an open area for that, but the anxieties are there.
There's a lot of trepidation now amongst the people. They're quite frightened of coming out and saying, you know, these aims are wrong, but there is a kind of fear about a world war and what it will do for Germany.
Peace in Europe hangs by a thread. Then Chamberlain offers a new, extraordinary compromise. Hitler can have the Sudetenland, provided he promises this will be the last of his territorial ambitions. Hitler immediately replies,
Yes, yes. It's the last territorial demand I shall make in Europe.
Within hours, the Munich Agreement is signed. It's an extraordinary coup. Chamberlain is convinced war has been avoided. For Hitler, it's a double triumph. Germany's borders have again been expanded. And he can continue his lie that he's a man of peace. Once again, he's a national hero. In Berlin, the secret conspiracy against Hitler collapses. Hans Oster and his colleagues burn all the evidence. With Chamberlain's climb down, they've lost heart. The leadership melts back into the army command structure. Hans Oster, the leader of the conspiracy, hides his opposition and remains a colonel in the German military intelligence. Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, who had wanted to shoot Hitler, joins a special forces group and will fight on the Eastern Front. General Erwin von Witzelbahn is promoted to commander-in-chief of an army group. Fritz von Schulenburg also throws in his lot with the military establishment and is later promoted. Their loss of courage means Hitler is now free to move on to the next phase of his expansionist plans. Six months after signing the Munich Agreement, he tears it up. In March 1939, German troops roar straight through the Sudetenland and occupy the whole of Czechoslovakia. This is no longer merely uniting German-speaking people. This is territorial expansion. Yet even so, Britain and France are still unwilling to go to war. For the German people, it looks like another amazing triumph. Across Germany, there's renewed euphoria. Germany has acquired not just the Sudetenland, but the whole of Czechoslovakia, without firing a shot. It's Hitler's first step in his acquisition of Lebensraum, the extra living space he's promised the German people.
It's a long-standing notion, going back to the 19th century, which was that Germany didn't have enough space for its people.
Hitler's popularity soars to new heights.
He had proved yet again that he could take risks. They were calculated risks, but they'd been so cleverly well calculated, they actually worked.
To many people, he's the country's greatest diplomat ever. There's an outpouring of adulatory letters and poems. A 17-year-old girl writes,
Hitler is a great man, a genius, a person sent to us from heaven.
One Western newspaper reports, the great majority of Germans could now find some point of identification with Hitler and his achievements. What the German people don't know is that this will be Hitler's last major bloodless victory.
The international community was outraged by it. Stalin denounced him, Chamberlain denounced him, and the French denounced him. Hitler is hell-bent on war. The only way to stop him is through a powerful military alliance.
But even now, the German people have faith he won't take them to war. They're wrong. At the beginning of September, a German warship in the free port of Danzig opens fire on the Polish garrison. Meanwhile, German troops pour across the border into Poland. This time, Britain and France react. Both countries are signatories of a treaty guaranteeing Polish independence. They now have no choice but to come to Poland's assistance. On September the 3rd, 1939, 2 days after the German invasion, Britain and France declare war on Germany.
This country is at war with Germany.
What Hitler has promised will not happen has happened. World War II has begun. In Germany, there's a mood of fear and doom.
There was no appetite amongst the German people for what could be seen as a resumption of the First World War, which had been utterly catastrophic for Germany. From contemporary reports, we know that the mood in Berlin was somber and depressed.
The war they'd hoped to avoid has finally arrived. But then, very rapidly, the mood changes as German forces crush all opposition. Poland is overrun in weeks. The German army then turns west. War spreads across Europe. It's accompanied by more easy victories. Germany occupies Denmark and Norway.
I mean, this is joined-up warfare. This is tanks, artillery, all working in unison.
Soon afterwards, German forces storm into Belgium and Holland.
This is a war that no one has ever seen before, and it's absolutely devastating. This is war at its most brutal.
By midsummer 1940, Hitler is in Paris at the head of a victorious army. He has defeated the combined forces of both Britain and France. In front of the Eiffel Tower, he proclaims,
"I'm the greatest strategic genius of all time."
Many Germans who had begun to doubt him start to trust Hitler again. In a matter of months, and with minimal losses, Germany has overrun Europe. Hitler may not have kept his promise to avoid war, but at least it's been a brief one. He's grabbed more territory than the Germans had won in the entire course of World War I. A war that lasted 4 years and cost millions of German lives. He tells his senior military commanders,
No one has achieved what I have achieved. I've led the German people to a great height.
The idea of Hitler's military brilliance spreads across the world. National leaders in Europe and Asia rally to his support. That summer, Italy enters the war on the German side. Hitler and the Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini have much in common.
Hitler, from the beginning, admired what he called the great man across the Alps. And it's reciprocated. Mussolini admires Hitler for what he's achieved.
In the autumn, Germany's old ally Japan also joins Hitler. The Axis powers are born. Hitler strides the world. Yet what the Germans don't realize is that the war is far from over. The devastation is only just beginning. Adolf Hitler is at the height of his power. He's conquered Europe. For millions of Germans, he's the greatest military and strategic genius of all time. Yet the German people are about to discover that what they've been told is a tissue of lies. This is the story of how reality starts to break through the Nazis' propaganda machine. How Hitler commits the biggest military blunder of his career. And how, hidden from sight, his leadership begins to fall apart. Months after the start of the war, and Adolf Hitler appears to stride the world. He's restored Germany to greatness. His people, once fearful of war, are now reassured it will all be over very soon.
He's seen as a great war leader who seems to be delivering all the victories without the significant suffering that people still remember from World War I.
Behind him, the German people believe, stands a brilliant and united Nazi Party leadership. But then, that facade begins to crack. In the early summer of 1941, a lone German officer parachutes into a field in southern Scotland. He's quickly picked up by an amazed Home Guard and taken to London to be interrogated. At first, nobody believes his story. But then a remarkable tale emerges. The lone parachutist is none other than the Deputy Führer and Hitler's oldest associate, Rudolf Hess.
Rudolf Hess has been a leading figure in the Nazi Party since the 1920s. He's been Hitler's personal secretary throughout all of that period. So here was a man who was a big part of the Nazi machine, very well known, very famous throughout Germany.
puzzle. What's he doing alone in Britain? Hess is held in the Tower of London. As the interrogation continues, he tells British agents he's come on a secret, one-man mission to negotiate peace with Britain. The British are astonished.
There's a sort of general sense of, well, what on earth is going on in the British establishment? It just appears increasingly as a sort of a lunatic mission.
But then a much more revealing story emerges. Hess's private mission is not really about peace at all. His main concern is that amidst the jockeying for power inside the Nazi leadership, he's losing his position as Hitler's closest confidant and ally.
He imagined that if he could pull off this diplomatic coup, it would sort of restore his own image, his own importance in the Nazi hierarchy.
It's a crazy idea. But critically, it's the first public sign that the Nazi leadership, far from being united, is a seething mass of rivalry and infighting.
It revealed really there was something rotten at the top of the Nazi party.
In Germany, Hitler learns of the secret mission in a letter left behind by Hess.
He's absolutely furious. He calls for his aides and his adjutants and shouts and screams.
This was perhaps the first time that a senior Nazi leader had broken ranks.
It was a huge crisis, and it's probably the biggest embarrassment that Hitler and the party ever experienced. Hess had betrayed the party, betrayed Hitler.
The problem for Hitler: how to maintain the illusion of a united leadership when it clearly isn't. The task of spinning the story to the German public falls to Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. Goebbels is one of Hitler's most trusted and able cronies.
If there's a problem, Goebbels will be very good at fixing it. If there's a problem, Goebbels will be very good at representing it. If there's a problem, Goebbels will be the man to go to.
Since the outbreak of war, from his propaganda ministry in Berlin, Goebbels has exercised total control over the German media. But this is a spin doctor's nightmare. How to restore the image of a united Nazi leadership. Goebbels' answer: to present Hess as a one-off rotten apple.
Goebbels dealt with the defection of Rudolf Hess by simply portraying him as a man who had lost his reason, who had gone mad. Under the pressure of work, and his commitments had broken under the strain, effectively.
It's an answer many Germans find hard to accept.
And it certainly didn't play very well with the German public, who naturally would have asked, well, if the deputy Führer is insane, why is he still in his post?
The Hess crisis passes, but for the first time, the image of Hitler's leadership is exposed as seriously out of line with the reality. That gap is about to get much bigger. In the summer of 1941, Hitler does what he's always promised. He invades Russia. It's something he's vowed to do since the early days of the Munich beer halls. For the German Führer, it's the final showdown with his biggest enemy, communism.
It was, I saw them, either Nazism conquered Soviet Bolshevism, or sooner or later Stalin and the Soviet Union would conquer and exterminate the Germans.
As German troops storm across Russia, Hitler is also fulfilling something else he wrote about in Mein Kampf 16 years earlier. He's winning Lebensraum, conquering territories occupied by what the Nazis regard as inferior races, so that the German people should have extra living space.
Space had to be found, not in the West, that was closed, but in the East, the Slav East, that area made up of human beings who were barely human and therefore deserved no special compassion.
The German troops advance further and faster through the Soviet Union than anybody imagines possible. Within weeks, they penetrate hundreds of miles into Soviet territory. The Red Army crumbles.
They take over 1.5 million Soviet prisoners of war. It looks like Hitler is going to win the war.
Operation Barbarossa, as it's known, seems to be an extraordinary success. In Germany, there's relief and jubilation. Hitler's position as a great leader, briefly undermined by the Hesse affair, is restored. To the German people, it looks as though the Führer is delivering the short war he's always promised. Communism will be defeated in weeks.
And in the autumn of 1941, Hitler gives a speech. He says Russia is destroyed and it will never rise again. He thinks he's won the war.
But then, progress slows. The Russians start to fight back. The Soviet Union calls on its vast reserves of people, many millions more than the Germans. In private, Germany's generals start to worry about the scale of the task in front of them.
There were stories of generals saying, "Christ, isn't this country big?" in German. Russia was so vast that to cover it was a logistical problem that was very hard to overcome.
Far from home, what most people can't see is that the German war machine is stumbling. Hitler, the self-styled military genius, is about to encounter harsh reality. At the German High Command, Hitler's generals plan their next move in the war against the Soviet Union. Many are now seriously alarmed by the task in front of them. But Hitler won't listen. Instead, he calls them daily, demanding they keep pushing forward.
Hitler never let his generals relax. He called them and he would go through some of their timetabling and say, "Go faster," which is a fine thing to say. But you can't make tanks and lorries and personnel move at a speed other than what is allowed by the logistics of it.
Hitler's generals do what they can. But then something happens over which they have no control. the Russian winter sets in. Temperatures drop to -32 Fahrenheit. Outside Moscow, the ground freezes solid to a depth of 5 feet.
You couldn't urinate in the open air. Fuel would freeze in machinery. Literally, the German war machine was just frozen. And it wasn't just frozen, it was starving. Probably the best you're going to be able to get your hands on is raw horseflesh, because you wouldn't want to start cooking it, because the smoke would leave your cellar and tell the Russians where you were.
In the face of these appalling conditions, the German army outside Moscow is finally forced to beat a tactical retreat. For Hitler, it's a serious setback. He's promised the German people the Soviet Union will be conquered in 6 weeks. It's now taken over 5 months. How can he keep his promise of a quick war when the reality is so different? Once again, Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine rolls into action. His solution? Simply to lie. He launches a barrage of propaganda. Newsreels show German soldiers enjoying the snow and routing a Russian rabble.
Goebbels made sure that stirring and exciting newsreels were a regular component of the German cinema goers' diet. He had propaganda companies in action, literally, with the frontline troops. And he constantly urged his propaganda crews to get as far forward as possible, to get the most exciting footage.
Hitler, far from misjudging the war with the Soviet Union, is presented as a great military and strategic genius. But is the propaganda barrage working? Goebbels has a well-developed system for finding out. He sends out spies to eavesdrop and record conversations. The news is all positive.
There was a cinema in every German town, even in very small towns. And we know from internal opinion reports within Germany that the population responded with enormous enthusiasm to these propaganda newsreels. They could hardly believe the exciting, dramatic scenes of German military success.
Goebbels was a lover of movies and took part very much in casting a lot of films, and Hitler was a big movie buff as well. So they very much felt that cinema was a great way of connecting with the German people.
Goebbels has excelled himself. It's a brilliant propaganda campaign. But then there's a new and totally unexpected development. Without warning, Japanese planes bomb the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The following day, the US declares war on Japan.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
For Hitler, it's a critical moment. Japan is an ally. Should he let the Japanese and Americans fight it out? Or should he side with his Japanese friends? It's a momentous decision, yet Hitler ponders it alone. The case against taking on America is obvious.
America was an economic power, a kind of sleeping giant, and he knew that it had massive economic resources that, if turned into military resources, could ultimately affect his ability to win the Second World War.
Yet, for Hitler, that's only part of the picture. As he turns the situation over in his mind, the case for supporting Japan is also strong. The two countries have an understanding to back one another. There's a good chance Japanese forces will tie down America in the Pacific and prevent her supporting Britain on the Western Front. But above all, Hitler believes the Americans lack what the Germans have: the stomach for a fight.
Hitler viewed America with complete contempt as a mongrel racial melting pot which was full of Hispanics and Jews and was racially worthless.
He thought the Americans were effete, that they'd accept terms that would leave Germany in control of Europe and leave Japan in control of the Pacific.
Finally, after only the briefest consultation, Hitler makes his decision. Four days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, he addresses the German parliament. Germany will declare war on America.
What's remarkable about that decision to go to war with America in 1941 is how easily it was made. Hitler didn't seem to have pondered on it for too long.
There's a gasp from the assembled ranks, but they're all Nazis, and he explains that we could not wait for developments to overrun us. We have to take the initiative.
America was seen as somewhere very far away, somewhere that couldn't really hurt Germany too seriously.
It's a huge decision, yet Hitler has taken it almost unilaterally. It will go down in history as his biggest blunder. German forces, already bogged down in Russia, now face the most powerful country in the world. Germany is about to be hit by a series of ferocious hammer blows that will shatter Hitler's image as a great war leader and transform the war. In Germany, the impact of Hitler's decision to go to war with America is felt almost immediately. There's a dawning realization that this is no longer going to be a short war. In private, there are bitter jokes. A candidate for the Waffen-SS is asked, "Are you willing to sign on for the whole war?" "No," he says. "Only the first 12 years." In bars and restaurants, Goebbels' spies listen to the gossip and detect a drop in public morale. It's time for a new initiative. In early December, in a speech to Nazi Party regional officials, Hitler makes a new promise.
He sees himself as the great military leader. This is the remarkable thing about the Führer, that it's not just a domestic leader. He is the great Napoleon. He's Frederick the Great. He's Caesar.
Hitler argues that victory is at hand. It will still be a short war, and it will be followed by a glorious future in which Germany will grow rich on the land and labor of the occupied territories of the East.
He wants to be seen as the man who knows what best serves German interests militarily.
And at first, it looks as though Hitler's prediction is coming true. Spring on the Eastern Front brings warmer weather. The German Sixth Army goes back on the offensive. The industrial city of Stalingrad is besieged. The Soviet defenders are corralled in a tiny strip of land along the river Volga. Tens of thousands face a brutal death.
Stalingrad is the most brutal type of fighting. No one would be the same after Stalingrad. Urban warfare is uniquely messy, and Stalingrad was a uniquely messy form of that type of warfare.
The Germans appear to have victory in their sights. But then, the battle changes. In a brilliant series of flanking moves, the Russians smash through the German lines from the north and south. They meet to the west of the city, completely encircling the Germans. Suddenly, the tables are reversed. Around 250,000 German troops are cut off from their supply lines. The German forces soon run low on everything, from ammunition to food.
You had lice all over your clothes. You had to eat and drink the little food you could next to your comrades defecating right next to you, because if you tried to go out to go to the toilet, you'd be shot at by a Russian sniper up on a roof.
The situation is untenable. The only thing that will save the Germans is a tactical retreat. Hitler, by now, has moved his headquarters to a huge complex of bunkers in eastern Poland. The Wolf's Lair, as it's known, is Hitler's new base, over 400 miles from the military command in Berlin. Here, far from the sight of the German people, Hitler holds a crisis meeting. Most of his senior military leaders call for a strategic withdrawal. The alternative, an entire army will be wiped out. But Hitler takes another unilateral decision. The Germans will stand and fight to the last man.
The Führer wouldn't sanction retreat. Good Nazis, the Wehrmacht doesn't retreat. It wins by going forward.
Very good idea.
He believes in staying at your post and dying if you have to, but you do not retreat. Absurd strategically, absurd militarily.
To Hitler's generals, this can only spell disaster. But one man sees an opportunity. Hermann Goering has a reputation as a powerful and effective leader.
Hermann Goering had been an able and brave First World War soldier pilot. Genuinely won decorations. He understood war. He'd fought it. He'd been in it.
Goering has been in the Nazi Party since 1922. He had turned the brown shirts from a rabble into a formidable fighting force. And he'd been injured in Hitler's 1923 beer hall putsch. As head of the Luftwaffe and Hitler's anointed successor, he occupies imposing offices in the center of Berlin, not far from Hitler's headquarters.
Hitler had great faith, justifiable faith, in Goering. His policies, his strategies seemed to be working. Build up the Luftwaffe into a mighty force, which would provide the means of blitzkrieg and would provide the means of attacking enemies.
His air force had proved decisive in the conquest of much of Europe.
He proved a very able commander indeed, one of the greatest, one would say, of the Second World War.
He's a man Hitler has learnt to respect. Goering now backs Hitler's refusal to sanction a retreat from Stalingrad. He suggests, instead, the army can be reinforced by airdrops using his Luftwaffe. Hitler enthusiastically embraces the idea. Yet Goering is not the man he once was, nor is his judgment. The man the German people believe is a mighty commander is in fact a drug addict. He's now heavily dependent on morphine. It's changed his behavior and clouded his mind.
Hermann Goering, in his early career, had been an intelligent and very capable man, had drifted into indolence and apathy.
He's also developed an all-consuming new interest. Looted artifacts from across Europe have been pouring into Germany.
In every country the Nazis occupied, their armed forces were rapidly followed by teams tasked with a mission to bring back to Germany cultural artifacts. These ranged from literary manuscripts through to paintings and sculptures.
At the heart of this operation is Goering.
Goering thought himself as a connoisseur and a great expert in matters of art and culture, but he has an eye to the business. He wants money.
He would draw up an order for the kind of paintings that he'd like to have brought to him at his country estate.
The me part of Goering is fascinating.
By 1942, he's amassed a huge collection of stolen artworks.
He has something like 1,200 precious objects and paintings in his personal possession.
Goering is not alone in his passion for self-enrichment.
There's hardly an official in Germany who doesn't dabble in this great project. It's on a massive scale, which is why it couldn't be controlled, because everybody had a skeleton in the cupboard.
Goering's preoccupation with drugs and art mean he's no longer an effective commander or a good judge of the military situation. His relief of Stalingrad is a disaster. He doesn't have enough planes or fuel. The promised airdrop turns into a farce.
The estimate that was given was that it would require something like 800 tons daily to keep those soldiers supplied. The reality was that they managed under 100 tons per day.
A soldier writes home.
We live on one piece of bread between 8 and a taste of warm water.
The German position in Stalingrad becomes untenable. Finally, at the end of the month, the German commander defies Hitler and surrenders. Nearly 100,000 German soldiers are taken prisoner, including 24 generals. When news reaches Hitler at the Wolf's Lair, he's appalled. It's a catastrophe so large, it will be impossible to hide from the German people. Once again, the man who has to break the news is Joseph Goebbels. He realizes this is going to require a new message. Out goes the idea of a quick victory. In comes the idea of a uniquely German grit and heroism.
The theme here, as in many other utterances from this time, is that true German heroism only comes to the fore in the face of defeat and immense suffering.
Seid ihr bereit, mit dem Führer als Phalanx der Heimat hinten behaupten,
Goebbels spells out his new theme in a speech many regard as the high point of his career.
Underneath the big banner saying "Total War, Shortest War," Goebbels talks to an audience of 14,000 cheering and admiring fans.
It's an appeal to the morale of the people to, in a sense, shift gear from support for the war, which was based initially on enthusiasm for the quick victory and the speed of the conquest, and now shifts towards this idea of endurance and embracing suffering.
And towards the end of the speech, he perorates on these 10 rhetorical questions that demand ever-increasingly loud yeses from the audience. Do you want a total war? And they all shout, yes! He then says, do you want a total war that's even more radical and brutal than you can possibly think of? And they go, yes, of course we do.
But Goebbels also has a second message. The talk of German heroism is underpinned by fear.
Goebbels increasingly put before the German people a nightmare vision where they would be driven out of their ancestral lands in the east, their women would be raped, their young people enslaved and deported to Siberia. They had no choice but to fight on.
It's a message most Germans are willing to go along with. But now, for the first time, there's also open opposition. In Munich, a group of students calling themselves the White Rose Group circulate anti-Nazi leaflets and daub anti-Hitler graffiti.
They would go around universities throughout Germany putting up little posters saying things like Hitler, mass murderer, or simply the word freedom. It seems a great example of how totalitarian the regime had become, that even to post the word freedom up on a wall was considered against the state.
The opposition is quickly snuffed out. But the German people are about to face another hammer blow. For 18 months, American arms and troops have been pouring across the Atlantic. The most powerful industrial country in the world has gone on a war footing.
What America can do is to turn its factories into places that can produce aeroplanes and tanks very, very swiftly.
Aircraft production soars. Car factories roll out thousands of tanks. Typewriter factories convert to machine gun production.
And the result is predictable. It's absolutely catastrophic for the Germans.
In the early summer of that year, American troops joined British forces in routing the Germans in North Africa. A month later, the Western Allies cross the Mediterranean and invade Italy.
And that is a shock to many German military who see that this is where the war against the USA is now turning against German interests.
The Americans, once dismissed by Hitler as a feat, are attacking his soft underbelly. Within weeks, the Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini is overthrown in a popular uprising. Germany loses its most important European ally. Italy's new leaders talk of surrender. Now, at last, the full folly of Hitler's declaration of war on America is apparent. Hitler gets the news at the Wolf's Lair. He's horrified. Mussolini is one of his oldest and most faithful allies.
Hitler was deeply disturbed by the failure of Mussolini. He'd had a deep affection for Mussolini as a leader, and some say some affection for him as a person, insofar as he had feelings.
The Führer orders German troops into Italy to hold back the advancing Allied forces. But this means spreading the German army very thinly. They're being pushed back in Russia. They face the threat of a renewed Allied attack in the West. And they're trying to hold Italy and the Mediterranean coast. But then something happens that's impossible to spin as anything but dreadful. Over the skies of Germany, Allied aircraft bomb the country's cities day and night.
The bombing of Germany became far more serious in early 1943. And from then on to the end of the war, it became an ever-present, a nightly horror for German cities.
In August that year, Hamburg, one of Germany's most important industrial cities, is devastated in a firestorm. At least 40,000 people die. Hitler responds with a highly significant shift in domestic policy. That summer, Hitler appoints Heinrich Himmler, the much-feared head of the SS, Minister of the Interior. Himmler is a fanatical Nazi, a man who likes to foster the image of a dashing fighter.
He lives for the Führer, he lives for the greatness of the German cause, and everything subordinated to that. Frightening man, one of the most disturbing of all the Nazis.
Himmler's appointment is a clear sign Hitler can no longer rely on the goodwill of his people. From now on, his position will depend on repression. But even now, most Germans have no idea just how awful their situation really is. Hidden from sight, the man they've put their faith in is in deep, personal trouble. The Führer has withdrawn almost entirely to his bunker at the Wolf's Lair in East Poland. He's simply unable to accept the reality of the situation.
The German people start to realise that they haven't seen Hitler for a while. There are certain key events where Hitler would normally turn up to, such as Heroes' Day, a kind of memorial for those who had fallen, and that year Hitler didn't come, and that was very much noticed.
He sits there every evening having his dinner, surrounded by his secretaries increasingly, because he doesn't want to talk to his generals, because they'll only tell him bad news. He's not yet 55 years of age, but he seems to be a man who's moving more slowly. He's not the old Hitler that he was. He's losing his energy.
He goes for long walks with his dog. He became very stooped. And he starts to tremble, possibly what we think now Parkinson's.
Hitler is now almost entirely dependent on the company of just two people. One is his girlfriend, Eva Braun.
He phones Eva Braun every day, which is a thing he'd never done before, to get some solace from her conversation.
The other is his personal doctor. Theodor Morell is administering large quantities of antidepressants and homegrown narcotics.
Not only are the drugs themselves pretty potent and noxious, there's also an extraordinary amount of drugs. For example, we have here one testoviron. He was on Tempidorm, a barbiturate suppository. He was on Sympathol. He was on Quadranox, which is a sedative. He was on Orchicrin, Optolidon, which is a painkiller and analgesic. He was on something called Obstanol, which was to help with acute and chronic constipation.
Yet the German public remain utterly oblivious of the fact that Hitler is a shadow of his former self. His position has always depended on success hiding the shocking reality of his regime. But now he's losing the war. The German people will inevitably start waking up to the truth. And some, at last, will fight back.